last night I was able to see Terrifier 3 at its world premiere at Fantastic Fest. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your excitement level for Terrifier 3. Now, this is probably the best possible way to experience this film. I was at the world premiere. I actually worked the red carpet before the movie played, in which case I got to talk to the director. I'll share some of that later in this review. And then when you're seeing a film like this at a genre film festival, there's just so much energy in the room, and it is the perfect audience for a movie like this. I went into the film very excited to see it, but also a little bit anxious. The second movie was such a pleasant surprise, and I loved how it just built out this big mythology. But you know, with Terrifier 3, they're gonna push boundaries, they're gonna go even further, and you wonder at what point in time is it gonna go too far for me and start to make me go, nope, you've crossed the line. Making it a Christmas movie, what they teased in the teaser for it, I just wasn't sure how I was gonna respond to this film, and that was half the fun of it. That a horror movie should be a little bit horrifying, and a movie called Terrifier should terrify you just a little bit as you go into it. With that said, let's get started with the good. And I'm very happy to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It expands upon what worked in the previous film without just rehashing it. Now, of course, with the Terrifier film, the big question is, how are the kills? And if anything, I think this movie had significantly more kills than the last film. And it felt like they were kind of spaced out better. The way the movie's done, it just felt like we're just move the plot forward, Art kills somebody. Every kill has something inventive about it that makes it unique and memorable and gnarly. There's so much that kind of happens in each of the sequences where there's always some new ingredient brought into it, some prop that he uses. There's just so many places where Art makes a new tool. Like, there's some cold elements that play into this that fit the Christmas vibe really nicely. There's the chainsaw that you saw in the trailer. There's some uses of animals at one point in time. We just go, it's got all the things that you want that make you squirm in all the right ways. Each of them just stands out in your mind. Some of the reason that's able to work is because it does kind of have that Christmas vibe to it. And it just opens some new doors, new opportunities for what Art the Clown can do in the film. And just on the Christmas vibe to it, it just provides us a unique aesthetic to the movie that pops a little bit more just because it's Christmas, it's lively, it does all of that. But Christmas is such a time for family, innocence, childhood joy, all of those things. And it just takes that, just this unbelievably twisted version of it, twists the joy into terror, and you're seeing children excited, and the whole time you're going, oh no, this is not going to end well, and just creates that tension in your stomach that runs throughout the film. Now, one of the things I mentioned before is that it does have a different tone and vibe to it. I'll have more to say that in the less positive sides to this, or actually the mixed aspects of the film. But because where the story starts off, it continues off the last film, and so our surviving characters are in a very different place, and it actually kind of deals with survivor's guilt, trauma.
Because you're kind of in that survivor's guilt chapter, I assume. For
I'd say so.
So that's kind of a common thing. So is there any character, Laurie Strode, or anybody like that?
I mean, one of my favorites that we didn't really discuss, Damien and I, is Mia Allen from the Evil Dead franchise, and she definitely goes through a lot of guilt. She goes through a lot in the 2013 movie, and I'd say they all influenced, especially probably Mia the most, because she's a bit unhinged in that movie, and I get to be a bit unhinged in here, so I'm very excited about that, and hopefully it translated well.
We'll see. I love that movie, so I'll be able to see if it's there.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know.
It builds out even the community. How did the massacre affect the characters? How did it affect the community in good and bad ways? How would family members respond to it? How would these two survivors be treated by the society? Like, there brings in the idea of true crime podcasts, and you go, yeah, in a city like this where there's survivors and there's this big mystery surrounding it, that would be something people would obsess over. So there's a whole kind of subplot about a podcaster. So it just feels like it's trying to have kind of more meat on the bones than just the meat being chopped off the bones by Art the Clown. Even kind of along those same lines, the Victoria character has a lot more to do here. She's not just kind of this off character in the background that makes little cameos and jump scares and stuff like that. In the expansion of the lore, which we'll get to in just a second, she's a piece of that. Now, to the lore, one of the things that I kind of loved about the second one was how just audacious it went with the lore. And coming out of that movie, it left a lot of questions unanswered. And one of the goals of this film was to answer a lot of those questions about the nature of Art the Clown. So one of the things I absolutely loved about the second film was all the lore and mythology. Okay. So how far out have you mapped that out, and how much can we expect? Because I was here at when it played at Fantastic Fest, and you teased the lore being paid off in this film. Yes. What can we expect without spoilers?
Answer a lot of questions, especially in regards to the supernatural aspect, the entity that resurrected Art, and its mission and its goal and its relation to Sienna. So we answer a lot of questions, because I know that was one of the most polarizing things. But I knew that. I mean, I created these movies by design. I designed it that way because I knew I'm gonna maybe make one more. So I didn't want to put all my eggs into the one basket of Terrifier 2. So I wanted to leave some puzzle pieces as we go.
Are there more puzzle pieces here?
Big time.
Oh,
maybe not big time, but yes.
And while this one it answers the questions from the last movie, this one isn't as much about raising new questions as it is opening new plot threads. By the end of it, it ends on a cliffhanger, in which case, in the Q&A afterwards, the director overtly stated,
there will be a Terrifier 4.
And it's those elements combined with the Christmas spirit and the shift in tone that just make it feel fresh. It complements and expands on the previous film. It doesn't just try and do a new, more extreme version of the last film. It creates its own path for itself that continues things forward. Of course, you go into these, you want it to be intense, terrifying, horrifying. This movie, from the opening sequence, had me wincing and clenching pretty much until the credits rolled. And then the credits rolled, and this music video played, which made me tense once again. But it keeps you in that state. As soon as you pause to breathe, you go, okay, we're okay. Then it cuts back to the next extreme, crazy situation. And that's what I go to these movies for. They're uniquely able to just go to this intense place. For me, I would say it was able to go right up to the line. It toys around with a lot of really dark stuff. Suicide, kids in harm, pets being harmed. Like, it goes to all the dark places. And I think it was able to toy that line without pushing me too far. I went in paying attention very specifically to how it was handling those more extreme ways that it was pushing the boundaries, and it didn't scare me away. It freaked me out, but it didn't freak me out too much, and that's what I want from these films. This movie is paced better than the last one. The last one probably intentionally was just so extravagant that it went on for 2 hours and 20 minutes. This is a shorter film, and even the way that it's structured, I felt like it kind of had this back and forth. Anytime there's a dialogue scene that you might be like, okay, it immediately cuts back to Art going into action. I'm pretty sure there's significantly more kills in this movie, and so there's just this nice pace of kill, move the plot, kill, move the plot forward. Felt like it moved along. Individual scenes were shorter, so just paced much better on all the ways that pacing works. As someone that went in excited for it, it delivered the experience that I wanted, the expansion of the mythology. It did something new. It made me excited for what's next. That's what I wanted from this movie. That's what I got. But there is a little bit more to talk about here, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. The big thing that comes to mind with the mixed aspects is that it is tonally pretty different from part 2. And one of the things that people liked about part 2 was the specific vibe that it had, that it was horrifying, but it was very playful. And this movie isn't quite as playful as the last one. It has the dark humor. Of course, Art the Clown does all of his gimmicks, the charming smile while being so creepy, but it's not as playful. It's a meaner spirited film. Even as I mentioned before, with characters dealing with survivor's guilt and traumatized by it, they're in a place that's much darker than in the previous film, and that kind of lingers over the film. The Christmas vibe does kind of balance it a little bit because you get the fun of Christmas, but it is a mean, nasty film, and some people are going to be a little bit disappointed by that. In my buddy Cody Leach's interview with the director, he talked about some of his influences.
What's up, brother? Good to see you, man. So, similar along the lines of what you just asked, but with 2, I was genuinely surprised at like a lot of the insertion of lore and the different tonal shifts and having a lot more of like a dark, funny edge to it. So what tonal shifts or what new changes and elements can we expect for the 3rd one?
I actually went back more tonally to the tone of part 1 and the atmosphere of part 1. Because I feel like part 2 was sort of my Dream Warriors, where it became more poppy and more fantastic, especially with the fantasy element. But I didn't want to make that mistake of now going too far in that direction. I wanted to reel it in and go back to what everybody sort of liked about Art in the first place, which was that grittier grindhouse vibe. So this may be the darkest and most disturbing one, believe it or not, but it still very much has the tone of part 2, just the bigger scope, and we're following obviously Sienna and the lore that we set up. So I think it's the perfect blend, the perfect marriage of 1 and 2.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you made Dream Warriors, but we don't want to head towards Freddy's Dead.
Correct. Yeah, I want to go back to Nightmare on Elm Street, the original now, if I can. Yeah,
awesome, man. We'll be there at 11. I can't wait to see it.
Thanks, brother.
And the reason this is in the mixed aspects is some people are really going to enjoy that it feels different. It has its own flavor to it, but others are going to think it goes too far, it's too cruel, it's too mean, or you're just going to miss part of what you enjoyed about the last film. Likewise, I touched on this just a little bit earlier, but it is a movie that has children die in it. It's a movie that has animal cruelty. It's a movie that has self-harm, suicide elements to it. And naturally, that is not going to play well with some people. Some people will not like that. It's anytime you're trying to make edgy content, you're going to go over the edge for some people. So just know, if you're sensitive to, in particular, children in peril, suicide, animal cruelty, it goes there. For me, as someone that is sensitive to those, with the way it was done, I was okay with it. I don't think this is, well, if you don't want to know anything going into it, this isn't a plot point, but it's how it handles some of those elements. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I went into the movie nervous that we were going to get the bedroom scene from 2 with a kid being tortured to death. That's not what the movie does. So if you want that, you're not going to get that, which if you want that, wow. But children do die in the movie. It does it in a way it does not linger on the suffering of a child at all. It does not do that. And for that reason, I was okay with what it did. All right, if you didn't want to hear that, back to talking about the movie. Final one people might ask about, does Terrifier 3 have a mid or post-credit scene? There was no mid or post-credit scene at our showing of the film. The second one had one, this one did not. It did have a music video play from, was it Ice Nine Kills, something like that, played after the movie. I don't know if that's going to play when it goes wide and plays in theaters. If it does, you want to stick around. It's a very cool music video. And even just seeing Art the Clown do his thing at this scale with a slick music video production is just worth seeing. But it's like the craziest, most violent music video I have ever seen. And it has some cameos from past things in the franchise. So definitely stick around if the music video is attached to the theatrical version, which I don't know, because sometimes things play differently at a festival like this a month out where they wanted to premiere the music video. I'm not sure if that will be the case next month when it releases. From there, let's move on to the bad. The big one that kind of comes to mind for me is the movie ends on such a cliffhanger that it was a little bit of a disappointment, where there's like a lot of things kind of teased, and you're building towards some things, and then you realize, oh, the movie's ending now. And it felt like there's a piece missing. It's a couple different things with the finale. I didn't feel like it fully felt like we were crescendoing to the finale. It felt like we got to the finale sequence. I thought that was the one right before what was next. It felt like there was going to be a thing afterwards. And then I was like, oh no, this is it. Like, we're bringing things to a close right now. And like, there's a big showdown, there's a battle, there's crazy kills that mess you up, there's twists, there's turns, there's reveals. Like, it has all the things that make for like, wow. But even the context where it happens kind of made it feel smaller compared to where the last one took place. And it kind of ended, and it teases so much. It ends on such a cliffhanger that there's some, I don't know, it didn't feel fully satisfying. To make the most overused comparison, it's a little bit of a Empire Strikes Back finale to it. Of, we close out this story and we tease what the next one is. And but it really is that sort of cliffhanger, that sort of like open-ended, bit of a downer in many regards. And so, like in the theater, it's like, oh, it's ending. I wanted a little bit more here. Other one, there's a couple of plot points where the way they decided to play out what happens with certain characters, trying to be careful with how I say all of it, not to spoil anything, but it felt like in order to do a surprise, they cheated me out of a scene, and a scene that the character deserved. So there's a few things like that. You went, oh, that was kind of disappointing with the way they kind of did that. And one more big one, because part 2 was so much more ambitious than part 1, and I would say dramatically better in quality, there was this wow factor with that film where so many of us were just shocked and surprised how much we enjoyed that film. And there's a certain lightning in a bottle quality to so far exceeding expectations. And you can't really reproduce that with a sequel. So this movie doesn't have that wow factor, that surprise, like, I can't believe they did it. And in a sense, you can leave this one feeling disappointed because you didn't get something that you got with the last movie. But you can't. You can't just reproduce that. There's not a way to continue just cranking it, elevating to the whole next, we're going to space. Like, you can't keep doing that. This is a great complement to what came before. It doesn't rehash it, builds it out. But there was a specialness with part 2, a just dramatic improvement that wowed, that doesn't quite happen with this film. And a big part of that is simply that we went into part 2 with pretty low expectations, and it dramatically exceeded them, whereas now our expectations are much higher, and it delivers on them. It didn't disappoint, but it also didn't exceed high expectations. Just go in thinking that's what's going to happen. It's on par with the last one. It's not blowing it out of the water the way part 2 blew part 1 out of the water. As someone that went into this movie very excited to see it, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. It's a great companion to the last film. If you're a Terrifier fan, so long as you're okay with some of the darker, meaner aspects of it, you're probably gonna have a great time with this movie, if that's the right way to phrase it. Overall, it's a B+ on the entertainment scale, and 8 out of 10. And if you're a Terrifier film, see this movie. And if you're not, probably not gonna be the one that wins you over. Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out my other Fantastic Fest coverage somewhere around here, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.